Welcome to the Town of Air Finance Committee meeting on Thursday, July 31st, 2025 at 6 p.m. in the Air Town Hall. This is a hybrid meeting. This meeting of the Finance Committee will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation via Zoom is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast, unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with a particular interest in a specific item on this agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may access the proceedings by joining Zoom meeting ID 978-772-8220 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager at atm@air.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100, prior to the meeting. I call the meeting to order. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the review and approval of the minutes from our last meetings on April 17th and June 18th. There was, on the first minutes that you emailed us, Eric, there was the wrong date was on one of them, so I fixed it on this printed copy.
All right.
Other than that,
Yeah, there's a typo on the first page of the April 17 minutes.
Found that one too.
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs down. Second line, pint versus point.
okay, we will make it a point. Okay. Update it. Okay, any other changes, notes, modifications? Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the April 17th minutes and the June 18th minutes. Last time one change. I guess two changes, including the date.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So approved. Okay, this evening we are very lucky to have Barbara from our finance group. And I'm sorry, Barbara, I can't remember your name or title. I apologize.
No worries.
Oh, it's right on the presentation. Barbara Tierney, Finance Manager, Treasurer, and Tax Collector. And to walk us through some information about the Town of Ayer's debt service and borrowing. Thank you very much, Barbara, for coming and doing this.
So this is just a very higher level overview without getting into detail, just to start things off in the future. If you'd like more information, we can go from there. Are you going to run that, Robert?
Sure, I'll do it
and
for
I'll
you.
just tell you. Okay.
You
All
bet.
right. All right. So on this slide, it just talks about how we issue debt. As this is up there in Ayer, we typically issue a bond anticipation note, which is a shorter term borrowing for a year or less until we have a large enough amount to do a bond issue. In general, if you don't have 7 million or more that you need to issue, they recommend doing a short term and then rolling it over until you have a large enough amount. And again, a bond is a long-term, ban is a short-term. Oh, you're good, Robert, thank you. So the process, this is just 4 lines, but there's actually a lot that goes into this. So the first line says that projects are reviewed and approved by the Capital Committee and Select Board. So this process actually starts fairly early in the fall. The Capital Committee meets quite often, and all the department heads present a capital plan and then a capital request for the upcoming fiscal year. The Capital Committee reviews every single project. They discuss, deliberate, and then meet with various departments that they have any questions or concerns with. At the end of this, the Capital Committee determines the funding sources for each and every project, whether it's gonna be a borrow, use capital stabilization, or some of the enterprise funds can just have it in their actual budgets for the year. And once it's approved, it goes to the select board. They approve a recommendation to the select board, and then it gets approved by the select board. Assuming that it gets to that point, there is then a borrow article produced for all the projects that were approved to be approved at town meeting. And then if it is then approved at town meeting, it goes to the next steps. First, a certificate of vote has to be sent to bond council. They produce a legal list of requirements. They issue that to me. I then have to complete that legal list. It can be very extensive, depending on the amount of projects, but it is very necessary in order to be able to legally produce a bond issue. Once that's fulfilled, at the appropriate time, the town will issue a ban or a bond. And what I mean by appropriate time is, as long as the funds have been spent, then you're going to be issuing a bond for them. So the next slide, there's two types of debt service. There's declining debt or equal principal debt. Yep.
Question.
Sure.
So the ban is the bond anticipation note?
Yes.
Because I remember I asked you
Yep.
this when we sat down and talked.
And that's a short term, usually a year or less.
Right, because you don't want to just issue a bond for every amount here and there that we borrow.
Yeah, doing a bond issue is very expensive, and there's a lot more to it than there is doing a bond anticipation note. And in general, if it's under $7 million, they don't recommend it, because $7 million, at least right now, seems to be a trigger point for a rating call. And if the rating call happens, then you're at a level for a bond issue.
So essentially it would be either like a large item would immediately be, since if it was around $7 million, we would be going to bond, or as you described it, you would have several smaller items, and when you would short-term use the bond anticipation notes to get to do the borrowing, and then if it gets up to
A larger amount.
you would essentially bundle those, correct?
Yep, so
And issue a
historically in
bond for that.
Ayer, they will go and do a bond anticipation note. For example, we did one in fiscal '22, then we did another one in fiscal '23 and rolled them over, and then we did a bond for all 3 years combined in fiscal '24.
And then that big bond, then you paid off those
Yes.
pre-existing bond
Yes.
anticipation notes, and now the debt was all
In one
in
issue.
one bond.
Yep, very good.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. So, two types of debt service, equal principal or declining debt and level debt service. Historically, Ayer chooses declining debt service, which is very important when thinking about sustainability and future sustainability of the town. So the next slide, so I'm going to give you just an example of why, in my opinion, it is important to do declining debt versus level debt service. So this is an example of a $3.5 million borrowing for 20 years. I can see it in your handouts. I don't know if you can see it in the screen, but the highlighted amount, the debt service in this type of level debt service stays right around $260,000 a year for the whole 20 years of the borrowing. In this example, if you chose that type of debt service, you'd be paying $1.653 million in interest over the 20 years. So if you go to the next slide, declining debt service, same 20 years, same estimates as far as rates, terms. By doing declining debt, you're starting off paying a little higher, about $315,000 in year one, but then as the 20 years progress, the amount you're paying every year decreases. And if you notice on the interest column, in this type of scenario, you're paying about $1.47 million in interest. So it's about $183,600 less that you're paying over the 20 years. When you combine that with all the projects and every year, by consistently doing this, there's a significant difference on what you pay. Any questions on that? Next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot from what I call my debt book. The last bond issue we did was fiscal 2024, so that's why you're seeing June 30th, 2024. And you can see it shows, this is for the whole town, so this includes the general fund budget as well as all of our enterprise funds. So for example, in fiscal 25, you can see the principal amount and the interest amount totaling about 3.394 million. And then it decreases from there. So this is a snapshot in time from the last borrow. So this doesn't include anything that's happened since June 30th of 2024. And these annual debt service amounts will stay these amounts consistently until each project is paid off, unless there's some extenuating circumstance like an extreme change in interest rates. Next slide. Oh, sure.
Quick observation.
Go ahead.
Essentially, this is, again, a snapshot. So if we were to do, the town was to do no borrowing from this point on, this is how our debt service would
Correct.
pan out for the next 2 years.
Yes.
So then, as we go forward, the new bond or bands as we do will then start, the principal interest payments on those will be start.
In addition to
those.
that.
In addition.
Correct. So as you know, in May, as noted in this, nope, you were good, Robert, we did a new ban issue, so that snapshot doesn't stay stagnant for very long. And we did a ban anticipation note of $5.6 million in May for 1 year. It was a short-term borrowing, again, because it is under that $7 million threshold, so that was the recommendation.
I maybe you've answered it, I'm not sure. I'm
Okay.
sorry. If you did, I'm sorry. I don't understand how, I understand the concept and the principle of the ban and the bond, but if it's a 1 year borrowing and then you like aggregate them until, great, we hit 7 million,
Yep.
but it's only for borrowing for 1 year, how do you continue to aggregate larger amounts? If I've borrowed $1 million for a year, don't I have to pay that back over the course of the year?
Yeah, so what happens is, for example, on this one, we did a ban for 1 year for $5.6 million. So next year, we're gonna pay this off and go to a longer term borrowing for the 5.6 million plus anything new that's come along since.
So we end up essentially paying off the whole 5 million in that year.
We refinance.
With the new borrow.
I would conceptually think of it as a refinance.
I get it.
We're refinancing the 5.6 million.
You're essentially not paying the $5 million over the year. You're just issuing a bond plus your new borrowing to pay off the ban. Like, so if we borrow another $5 million, you're taking a bond for $10 million, paying off the old $5 million.
And
Now
you're
you've got a new
rolling it
debt.
into the next year's
So
borrow.
roughly, like, how much, you're using a $5 million example, how much principal would you pay in that year of the ban?
So essentially none. It's an interest only. That's why you'd only want to do them when they're under a certain dollar amount and that the value's there. So in this case, it was there to just do this for 1 year. So the interest amount that's highlighted on this is about $223,000. I don't know if you can see it, but it is in your handout. So that is the amount that will be paid in fiscal 2026.
I get it now.
Yep.
So basically, you pay this much interest to get access to $5.6 million.
It's to fund it for the year, and then you'll just refinance, not a very technical term, but not sure how else to describe it. You'll refinance this, and then you'll add more to it.
So you can estimate the interest rate is again about 4%. Right, roughly.
Yep. So we did receive a premium on this borrow, so the net interest cost ended up being a little less, because we were lucky. Well, we weren't lucky. We have good, sound fiscal processes, and Ayer is valuable and does well with its bond anticipation notes. But the example on this that I was trying to mention was for fiscal 2026, I'm sorry, for fiscal,
Oh, so Barbara,
there you go.
question. So the bond typically is issued and then it's purchased by various investors. How do you fund the bands? The same way?
Same way. So an investor purchased this. It's the same way. It's just a 1-year treasury note instead of
Okay, I see.
longer ones. Yep. Yep. So just to move on, so I wanted to show you, for example, so the $223,000 is added to the overall debt for the year. So I think you want to go back one slide, Robert, to the
Sure.
fiscal 26 example.
Yep.
So this is just, I wanted to show you, so I took 2025's debt service to 2031 from that snapshot of the budget book that I showed you earlier, and just showed you the change in the debt service over through 2031. So then looking at and pulling out fiscal 26 specifically, we are going to have the decrease of $398,000 in debt service, but then we're going to be paying $223,000 for the interest for the bond anticipation note. So the net change for the year is actually only a decrease of $174,000 and change. And then down at the bottom, this was just for informational purposes. The portion of the decrease, a lot of it was the general fund just by circumstance. So $90,532 of the decrease for the year was general fund debt. And then the estimated amount of the band for the general fund was $20,860. So we had a $69,000 decrease in the general fund debt service budget this year because of that. And then just a next example, fiscal 27. So this I just wanted to pull out to give examples of the types of things that are part of this change. So in fiscal 27, we're anticipating a $317,000 decrease. Out of that $317,000, $193,800 of it is retired debt that's retiring, which means it's done being paid. $35,250 of it is specifically a decrease in interest for one bond, which was a 24 bond issue. And then the remaining $88,000 and change is just decreases because we do use declining debt for a whole variety of different smaller projects. And then down below, I just wanted to show you, these are the projects in the general fund. These are the projects that retire in fiscal 26. So the last payments in fiscal 26, and they'll be paid in 27, making up that 193.
But chances are you are going to probably have some new borrowing, say
Yes.
2027 or something.
We are.
So by the time you get to 2027, your net number isn't going to be
Exactly.
this.
Yep. So yep, that's it. We'll definitely get to that. And then to the right, I don't know if you noticed, I wrote to the right of the 317, I noted the 800 and is that 69,000 and change. So that was my estimate back in the end of April when I created this for a new borrow for fiscal 27. That has changed now that we have a whole new set of years approved, but that's exactly what you were getting at, Jen, is that I was estimating about $869,000 increase for a new borrow in fiscal 27. That was back last April when I created it. So more information's come since, more things have been approved since, so that has already changed. But yes, you're exactly correct. So before I go over the newer changes that I have on that last sheet, I just want to go over the last slide for just to let you all know that the goal here is to maintain the needs of the town while minimizing the financial impact in order to remain sustainable. Some of the ways we do this, the first one is reviewing capital projects closely using the capital process. This is an extensive process, and it is done well and taken very seriously here in Ayer. Second, we use capital stabilization for smaller projects. By doing this, you can have these smaller projects that you don't borrow for, so you're not paying any interest. Saves you money. For number 3, we only issue debt for when the funds are needed and for the amount needed. So for example, the $5.6 million ban we did this year, that was out of $7.635 million of approved capital. But I only borrowed the 5.6 because the projects hadn't started or were delayed significantly, or the spending just wasn't there for fiscal '25. So we didn't want to borrow the money before we needed it. The next item, number 4, so we try to replace retiring debt to avoid large dips and spikes in debt service. It's kind of why in those examples I wanted to show you, you have a decrease that offsets the increase so that you're not having such a big increase as you normally would have. This is actually, both 3 and 4 have become kind of a challenge in the last couple of years. I hate to say it, but this COVID world, we've had delays that I've never seen in projects. Ordering a ladder truck that's taken 3 years, supplies costs changing so quickly that you have to delay a project and go back to the drawing board. So it has been an interesting challenge for the last few years, but I think we do a good job of, the departments communicating with myself, with Robert, and just keeping me in the loop on where they are so that we can help minimize these spikes as much as possible. The next one is to use premiums to reduce the amount of the bond issue, therefore reducing debt service. So Ayer does have a strong economy with their AA2 rating, and we've been complimented many times by Moody's for our strong practices, our conservative approaches, and that makes us a good investment. And I will say, this year, the market, the way it was when we did the borrow, there were towns not getting any bids at the time we went out to bid, and we received 3, and we received a premium. So that's a testament.
What's a premium?
The premium is when they pay more than what we asked for. So they pay more than what we asked for, and then we take that money. There's by statute things we can do with that money, and it's usually pay down debt. So we reduce the borrowing cost or the amount that we borrow generally, or we have to use it to pay the debt service. You never know what that's going to be, so you don't budget for that, but it is always a pleasant part of the process. And then the last item on here is to capture opportunities to pay down projects when going from a ban to a bond. That came about in the beginning of fiscal 23 to 24 because we had gone to ban for 2 years in a row, and we knew we were going to go to bond, and there were some smaller projects. So we chose, a finance committee and the finance team chose to pay down some of the smaller projects that we had borrowed for short term instead of going to bond. And it saved, if I remember, it was significant savings, around $228,000. So I'm hoping maybe that opportunity may present itself again when we go to bond next year, because we're again going from ban to bond. We just have to make sure the projects are eligible. So that was the last slide on this original presentation. Do you have any questions before I show you my addendum that I set up just today?
Mr. Chair, could I just great job, Barbara. Just to stress 2 points and also for the public's benefit. So all of the capital planning process that Barbara's talking about, a lot of the things, as this committee is aware of, but for the public, are governed by the financial policies. So if you look at the financial policies under capital, it has the thresholds that trigger when to borrow, triggers, as Barbara mentioned, using capital stabilization and so forth. And those policies are reviewed, as this committee knows because you were part of it, reviewed every few years. So just want to stress that it's a codified policy. The second thing, just real quick, Mr. Chair, and Barbara has done a very good job of this, of not borrowing until we actually need the funding. And she talked about the COVID world has put a lot of challenge on this. As this committee knows, there's 1 to 3 year lag times on fire apparatus to borrow. Unfortunately, of no fault to the town, one of the things, the West Main Street Bridge, that construction is finally going to start, but initially funding was borrowed several years ago, and then there was a delay. In hindsight, if we don't have a crystal ball, if we didn't have to borrow at that time, it would have made more sense, wouldn't you say? So, but we have Barbara has a good handle on that, and with the departments as we move forwards. So, just wanted to stress those 2 points,
Good
that
points.
it's set by policy and about the spikes.
Yes, thank you.
So the policies were set by this town, right? So
Yes.
each town's policy could be slightly different?
Yeah,
Oh,
It can be slightly different. They are all based on mass general laws
Yeah.
that we have to make sure we follow.
so
Each
where
town-
would your expertise come in? Is it like what Robert said, like select the correct timing to borrow? What others, sort of like why you operate within the framework of the laws or, the town's, physical policies, then what, like, what can you do that, to say that a good manager versus a less than conscientious person, what would be the difference?
So one thing is to know them, know the laws, and understand the policies. And I am thankful to be part of the team that has worked on those policies and revised them over the last 6 years. The other thing is it's very important that I collaborate and constantly, throughout the year, talk to the different department heads who have projects, see where they're at. I monitor all the spending and just really have to keep checking in to make sure where their projects are as I estimate what I'm going to need for borrowing before the end of the year. If you don't borrow enough, then you end up with a deficit that could be an issue. It hits your free cash. And then again, you don't want to borrow too much too soon, not only for the tax impact, but there is some laws on the books regarding earning interest on money that you've borrowed here in Massachusetts. And that's become another new thing that's developed in the last few years because interest rates on money markets and CDs and stuff have increased substantially. So we have to really watch those
I see.
items.
So because
Yeah.
you could make that a practice that you borrow at the lower rate than you earn interest, right? So that's what I know, people, homeowners, I have a talk with people who could afford to pay off their mortgage, but they choose not to because their mortgage rate is lower than what they can earn otherwise. So they essentially borrow the money to invest.
Yes.
So the towns are not allowed to do that
We
in
are
a
not.
large scale.
Right.
Yeah. So it's I guess a good manager versus a bad manager. I just try to do a good job for the town, keep things as well done as possible, organized, and just making sure we follow all the financial policies and do our due diligence to not borrow too much, not borrow too soon, and keep us funded at the same time.
And if I could just add, Jen, because it's an excellent question through the chair, Barbara, like many of us, take a very conservative approach to this, which I think serves towns better. Not all towns take a conservative approach. But also, you may have saw in some of Barbara's slides reference to Hilltop Security. So Barbara also works closely with the town's bond counsel. Peter Frazier is the principal through Hilltop. So she does a lot of work with them as well, monitoring, looking at scenarios, and so forth. So that's just an added professional resource that the town has.
I assume that this Hilltop Securities is sort of like almost what you call it, almost like a Goldman Sachs type of. I'm thinking that as just an example, not necessarily, but because they do a lot of issuing of debt for the private sector, right? So I wonder if so do you have a choice of who to go to when you need to issue bonds, like the amount of fee they would charge? Is there, or is this pretty much like only a few companies do and they charge the same amount?
So there are not many who have a municipal sector that I'm aware of. I'm aware of Hilltop, and I'm aware of it's USFAI. It's a division of Unibank that has municipal services. Hilltop is unique in the way they present and prepare documents for us that I liked. Also, their debt book is something that I haven't seen anyone else do. The basis fees are very similar across the board for what the different companies charge. But yeah, they are one of the two that I'm aware of that I would potentially work with.
And are those companies also, I don't know if vetted would be the right word, but have to be approved by Massachusetts also?
Yes, I mean, they specifically have sectors for our needs. And they are the ones that I call if I have a question about the law or a statute or anything along this nature.
Barbara, the bond issues, I assume that there's some sort of prepayment penalty if you pay them early? Is that,
So yes, so there's something that's called when a bond is callable. So when that happens, you cannot so for example, there is something called refunding a bond. So if interest rates were say 4% and all of a sudden they drop down to 0, which did happen around 2017, the Hilltop is the company that would tell me if my bonds were recallable on the market, where I could redo a refunding bond to save money. I wasn't here, I was in a different town, but I did do one for the town I was in at that time. And I believe Ayer did one also at that time. I know they did one at that time. So yes, that it has to be callable.
okay.
Yep, and Hilltop is that's their specialty, so they make sure we do it correctly.
So in the case of the bridge where we borrowed the money and had to sit on it for 3 years, that we couldn't return that money without some sort of a penalty?
No, once you're paying for it, you're paying for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just the flip side is that if we didn't need the money, we could put the money in the bank and earn interest on that. So that's sort of like soften the, the cost a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like that's regulated though, right?
It is. So there's a little bit of a balance game. It's my job to make sure we earn a decent interest. You can't invest this money in a lot because it has to be flexible and available as it's needed and as things are paid. But you do want to get your best interest that you can. You hope it doesn't go over what your bond issues. I do extensive reporting every year and a calculation. It's called arbitrage to make sure we're okay. And I use a different division. It's still Hilltop, but it's a different division out of Texas that specializes in these calculations.
So determine whether a bond, when it's issued, whether it's going to be callable or not, is the decision of this Hilltop Security type of a company.
So there's very many rules and regulations and timing issues of when when different treasury bonds become callable. They keep track of that for me, so I don't have to know. They tell me.
Okay. Yeah. Because I know that if I want to buy one, I look at that and, I think, callables are a lot, but there are also some that are not. So
Yeah.
I just wonder who make that decision. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, they let me know if something's callable. There could be things that are callable, but because rates are what they are, if rates all of a sudden decreased again, then what I would do is I would contact them and I would ask for them to take a look and tell me if there's a potential of me refunding a bond. And they would give me the legal advice I need. So this last sheet was because since last spring, some things have changed. So I just, again, over to the left is just the debt service that's set in stone from that first page that I showed you for the aggregate debt for the town. I added in the $223,000 that's coming due for fiscal '26. And then I am now estimating that we will go to bond next year for an very estimated amount at this point of $14.5 million. And under the fiscal '27 bond column, those are my estimated debt services for '27 through 2031, and then totaling.
Question?
It's a big change.
So that's in addition to the 30 million, I think it looked like, that we currently have on the book, or does that, some of that rolling into this to become 14 million?
So the this estimate includes the $5.6 million ban rolling in. It's part of the $14.5 million that I'm estimating going to bond. It also includes the ladder truck because that's estimated to arrive during fiscal '26. It includes the ambulance, which is estimated to arrive finally in fiscal '26, and then it includes a handful of projects and capital projects based on information I've received from department heads and their timelines and expected spending timelines. So that's how I came up with the 14.5 million to estimate.
So
It's a
is it-
very, it is an estimate.
Is it in this number? Well, again, down at the bottom, the total essentially seems to be the town has about 30 million in debt at the moment.
Debt service, yeah.
Is any of that included in the 14, or is the 14
Nope,
going?
this is an
directly
addition.
on?
This is new. And this is, I know it seems like a lot, but please keep in mind, this is the whole town. So we've had a lot of water and sewer infrastructure. That is a lot of our debt, at this time that I'm anticipating. The general fund debt, for example, the warrant article for fiscal '26 approved $6.937 million in debt. The general fund portion of that was $1.6 million. So just keep this in mind, this is a big picture of the whole town, and it includes the enterprise funds that pay their money from pay their debt service from their rates.
So,
Could I make some observations real?
Sure.
So this is what the town is paying each year right now to pay off to pay down our existing
Correct.
debt.
Yep, from the sheet
This
you're
is-
looking at.
And this is one thing you had to explain for me a little bit. This is a combination of the general fund debt and the enterprise funds debt.
Yes, everything I'm
So we're-
presenting today is a combination.
Combination of that. So the portion, and I met with her, Barbara, a few weeks ago, a few months ago now, as we were, how to put this together. And boy, you want detail. Make an
I have-
appointment with Barbara.
I have detail.
But you showed, started to show me the detail of how much of this was due to the general fund. And I'm correct, Robert and Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong here, the general fund being, which is, that debt service affects property tax rates.
Yes,
Yeah. And then the portion of that is to a enterprise fund, that portion is paid through the fees that are received by that
correct.
enterprise fund. Does that sort of give you a little more insight there?
Sure, but I mean, it's all the same thing. We can put it in different buckets. And
yeah.
maybe it's classified as real estate tax, and maybe it's.
Trash bag prices pay that, right? There's some other.
No, I know, but
means.
but that's what I'm saying. It's all basically the town has $30 million of debt right now, and
Oh,
we're
yeah.
but
we've
then after
approved.
next year, it will be
We've
more
yeah,
like
I'm
a
just saying,
46
we've
million.
approved an additional. I'm not making judgments. I was just looking for clarification.
Yeah, I'm also
Yeah.
trying to understand, like, where our situation compared to, do you say, just off the top of your head, just roughly, like another town, sort of, I'm also interested in, like, how we stack up against the other towns. So say that 30 million, our town's total budget, annual budget is also 30-some million? How much is
So if we just
without
the-
the
just
school,
the-
we not consider the school?
Without the school, it was just under 19, it was 18 million. in,
18.
Just the omnibus budget, not including enterprise funds, not including schools.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the schools are sort of like almost like self-sustained, right?
We're regionalized, so they're
Yeah.
separate. Yep.
Yeah. So
We pay that as an assessment.
So basically, our debt to the annual budget is not quite 2, but it's greater than 1, right?
To,
Like
Times
our
omnibus. We're talking about 2 times our annual budget.
yeah.
But why exclude the school? It still hits it's part of the taxes that the town collects.
Yes, it's just, we're talking about our debt service, and that's not
I
part
mean,
of our debt
I guess you're
service.
right. I don't understand the municipal government function. So I guess that, maybe I'm not, because if I took out that part, then the budget number is smaller, so that this debt to budget ratio seems bigger. So if you think of in terms of a household, as an analogy, it would be like if you're making $100,000 a year, you are carrying $200,000 in debt, which I think to a lot of people is probably very common. I don't know. Is that sort of like a reasonable analogy? But the thing is, homeowners, when you talk about $200,000 debt, they probably, a big portion of that is mortgage, right? But the town doesn't really, the debt is not any of that related to real estate. So anyway, so that's just I'm curious about that.
Air is in good shape. We have, I haven't looked at it this week. We have, as of everything that was approved through fiscal '25, we had just over $50 million in excess in ability to borrow. So and as we decrease every year, so the 14 million is very reasonable. The last time we went to bond, it was 11 million, so it's a little more, but we are in good shape.
Does our debt actually go down from year to year? Because whether we go to bond or just a ban, I'm assuming
Yeah.
that our total debt and debt service increases year after year.
So for example, for the general fund this year, in fiscal '26, the debt service budget did decrease by just under $70,000 for the year because we only had an interest payment and our debt service did increase. So our budget in the omnibus did decrease for fiscal '26 specifically.
But that's probably more anomaly. Most of the years you probably the overall.
I've seen it varies. It depends on the capital that's being presented, and the needs of the town.
How much do we historically carry as a total?
A total,
Is it like 50 million? Is it 30 million? Is it?
so we can borrow up to 5% of our equalized value. Historically, I don't know. I'd have to look
I
that
would
up.
say that in terms of absolute
I can
numbers,
look that up for you.
It probably won't make too much sense because inflation is so fast. But so what is the equalized value?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask.
Let's see if I can find it.
Is that like
So I didn't have it in the presentation, but an equalized value is the value that is put on all the property in the town of Ayer.
Write
So
that
the
one down.
value for fiscal 2025, well, so the real and personal property value for fiscal 2025 was $1,912,691,436.
almost 2 billion? So
So that's just your real and personal property. There are some other numbers that contribute to that value, but that's the majority of it.
We can borrow 5% of essentially 2 billion. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's our equal value, yes, 5% of our equalized value. I can get you the equalized value. I have with me the value of all the real estate and personal property, commercial, industrial, but there are some other numbers that contribute to that.
But, and I just went on that, so we have approximately 30 million in outstanding debt right now? Did I hear that correctly?
So as of June 30th, 2024, as of June 30th, 2025, that decreased by just under 3.4 million in debt service that was paid during fiscal 2025, and then we added $223,000 in debt.
So, but the actual, because it wasn't on those sheets, the actual outstanding debt on the balance sheet was approximately 30 million.
Without having the number in front of me, that's probably a good.
Okay, yes, and
educated
I
guess.
will, just approximate, so, yeah, okay.
But then we are looking to borrow 16 million or so.
14 and a half.
14, sorry.
So I'm estimating 14.5 million will be the amount we go to bond for next year, which will be the 5.6 million ban that we currently have, that will be paying that. And then we have the ladder truck, we have the ambulance, and then just a significant number of capital projects that were passed in the last 2 years.
I think we should get
We-
Dan back in
Yeah.
Dan, yeah.
here.
Dan the
Dan Van
borrowing man.
Skelwick.
I mean, we have had a lot of infrastructure needs, and then one of the things I do want to mention is from 2020 to 2023, we had a whole freeze of capital projects happening. So we had these few years of significant declining debt without really borrowing very much because everything was kind of at a standstill. So we are kind of playing a little bit of catch up with projects.
So the other thing I just noted is that, so again, the fire truck, and I think this was an interesting example, we approved that at town meeting, what, 3 years?
2023,
2023.
April of 23.
But because the delivery was delayed, we're actually borrowing it now.
We will borrow it at
Well,
the end
I
of,
mean-
at the end of fiscal 26, so first payment will happen in 2027, fiscal 27.
Because I feel like that's one thing where the diligent town manager will come in, right? So to determine the correct time to borrow.
Yes.
right? Yeah.
So this is why, we don't want to borrow the money when we're not going to have the service, because you don't pay for the service until it's, The bridge, they had borrowed a portion of it back in fiscal 22 in anticipation, and then they borrowed they did use some of the funding, and then they borrowed more in fiscal 23, or I did, and then in fiscal 24, there was this anticipated critical nature without knowing that the delays were going to happen on the state level that happened. And historically, if interest rates are low, it wouldn't be a big deal to borrow more than you need as far as arbitrage and interest earnings concerns, but you still want to try to smooth out when and where it hits the taxpayer. All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Of course. Is that it?
Any other questions? Very educational.
That was great.
And as Kurt said, there's just so much detail, it's hard to do in a presentation, but if you ever want to take a look, I have my spreadsheets and I have my debt book, and I'm happy to share them and let you look at them. They won't print on a piece of paper.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all right, so the next item, and it's really sort of the next two items, is our future Finance Committee meetings. And the next one, we were on the first and third of the month, first and third week of the month, since we're right up on August 1st and we're still in summer. What I'm proposing is that our next meeting would be on August 21st, the Thursday, which will be the third week in August.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think,
We had a giant list.
oh, you know what? Do you happen to have it?
I don't have it on me.
Oh, okay.
We had a big list of things we wanted to
Mm-hmm.
And
Just kind of opinions.
Well, a spur of the moment, not anything that I thought of,
A lot of culverts need to be done.
And I'm not against it at all.
No, I know.
The thing is, can you imagine, all this is still pretty much like a routine thing. We're not talking about like a schools or any of those things.
Right, but like all
Yeah.
this stuff is behind and
I know,
needs
yeah,
to be fixed. I'm not, but just in a sense, like the future, like would what is borrowing, what does he think about like future projects for the next 5 years?
You know he's got a list of
Oh, yeah.
things that need to get done,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I'm in no way, please repair the infrastructure.
We now have
I'm all for it.
We now have a stormwater enterprise fund, but it's one more enterprise fund to borrow.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like, it's all, it's the same big bucket, it's just.
Yeah, it's just that when you know, look at the infrastructure in this country in general, I think Ayer actually infrastructure-wise, maybe not the worst, but I feel like overall, you know, you look at this thing in the city, you know, everything's so horrible. And then, so I feel like, you know, you definitely need to spend a lot of money to fix things. And then, but without like raising tax a whole lot, it's really, I think, difficult to do that. You know, because I feel that, you know, this is my, you know, recent trip, and kind of one of the things that struck me was, you know, I saw other places where the infrastructure is so much nicer.
I think a coming attraction, which will keep the finance committee updated, and we're not quite there yet, for the FY '27 capital process. Barbara made many excellent points, but two of the key points was there was almost a 3-year freeze because of COVID.
Yeah.
And so from 2020 to 2023, then we've had this spike, my word, a sort of catch up, as Barbara mentioned.
Yeah.
And now as we come into the fall, we've already begun to discuss with departments that we have to take a even more stringent, conservative look at the request for FY '27, because we want to, as Barbara mentioned, balance that spike that she talked about. So we're going to have to be extra selective in terms of prioritization of projects. And the other concern too is on the federal level, is so much volatility, and I'm not saying that to make a political statement.
Yeah.
Volatility, we're very concerned how that translates not only in the federal, but with the grant programs,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But we will, as that process starts in the early fall, we should talk about capital again with the FinCom.
One thing that we had talked a bit privately, which is, you know, probably, I don't know, probably wouldn't go well with the people in the departments, was that if, say that, you know, some of the equipment, you know, renewal process, if it were individuals, we probably would be frugal and use something a little more, say, longer, and for example, maybe, you know, you're eligible to get a new computer every 5 years, but you know, if it were your own computer, you'll probably use it for 8 years. But here, sort of like is there any way to incentivize, you know, say people in various departments to, of course, you know, safety is, you know, utmost. We're not talking about sacrificing safety or anything, but all the effectiveness of the equipment. Say that if the fire truck isn't going to work anymore, then of course you need to replace that. But if there are certain things, say that if you know, like your whole suit of gear for each firefighter, I think they have to replace them every 5 years or something. Say, of course, it's only the people who actually use those things know if the stuff is still any good. If, say that they were, you know, I have no idea, so I'm talking out of total ignorance, would be some way to say that, you know, like, because if they could use it in 1 extra year, you know, if you aggregate all that, it would save money for the town. I don't know if, you know, again, this is because I'm ignorant. I'm sure the people who have run municipal government for a long time will have answer, probably shut down my idea. But if, say that we incentivize people to, you know, to try to take good care of the equipment, make them last a little longer, and then, you know, make the replacement cycle a little bit longer, that will kind of like bring down the cost a little bit. I don't know. It probably is all peanuts in the bigger picture, but
No.
just some ideas, something to.
Through the chair, I think Barbara might have a point on that.
It's actually about the 14.5 million. So if you want to finish your thought on that, it just dawned on me, I failed to mention that 14.5 million is a maximum exposure that I'm estimating based on original timelines from the departments. As things update, just like we didn't borrow the full 7.6 million, we only needed 5. We most likely, all the recently approved projects will not come to fruition and be borrowed for next year. So just keep that in mind. I was being very conservative on my numbers. Those amounts won't happen unless we actually need them. And I do feel like some of the departments and projects that have been approved in the last couple of years are anticipating at this point delays in the new timelines that are happening. So I'm sorry I failed to mention that earlier. But, yeah.
Thank you.
Jim, first of all, you're not ignorant. You're spot on, meaning in that approach. So we do use industry standards for some stuff on useful life, vehicles and so forth. And I think overall, departments in many cases do a good job to try to stretch that. But to your point, that's what I'm getting at for the fall. We need to really sharpen that pencil and look at some of these things.
Yeah, because I feel like
Yeah.
if the town within its power has the ability to give individual department some incentive to do this, I think it will, I think, save the town more than if whatever you will pay for as incentive. Because I do think that it's I feel like maybe I have a bit of a libertarian thought here. I feel like if people who are spending other people's money tend to be a little more cavalier about it than if they were spending their own money. But if we give them some incentive to be careful, I think hopefully they will become more diligent. I don't know.
But also just keep in mind that all of it also has to be approved by town meeting, and in case of large borrow projects, town meeting and the ballot.
Yeah,
But I know what you're saying.
yeah.
We do take it very serious, and hence, I think Barbara captured it best. There was a lot of catch up with the COVID freeze. That is over. Now we need to balance it out in FY '27.
I have a question. A lot of times things get brought up, as both you and Jen have said, with useful life. And it seems to, be, people like to stick to it. Is that an insurance reason or what? Because it's sort of like a gallon of milk. The milk doesn't necessarily expire just because the date stamped on it says August 1st.
Yep.
Sort of thing.
So just briefly, and we can talk about more. When I say depends, this is what I'm getting at. So for example, like if it's a public safety item like those breathing apparatus that the fire department has, let's say, and don't quote me, but for the sake of discussion, I don't know if he said they had a 15 or whatever the life is on that.
Sure.
Something like that, we definitely really adhere to as an industry standard. It's involving personnel and everything, right? But then there'll be a guidance on, say, a vehicle. And I'm not talking a fire apparatus, but I'm just going to use a random example, the building commissioner's vehicle. And it might have say, an industry standard of a 15-year useful life, right? There's an example where, sort of your milk example, if maintained correctly, which is the requirement of all vehicles, our goal is to get more than 15 years out of it. And that's one of the things I'm asking departments, as I do every year, but in really stressing for this fall, is what can, I hate to say it, but what can wait? Because you're right. So when I say it depends, if it's a real critical piece of public safety equipment or so forth, whatever the useful life is, we try to stick to that benchmark. On other areas where there is some discretion, say with vehicles and so forth, we try to extend that as much as we can. It is a good point.
We do that with computers as well.
Yeah.
Even though they depreciate over 3 years,
Yeah.
at least here, we keep them we just maintain them and keep them as long as we can. So I think a lot of us do that due diligence. The other thing they do is similar to bringing back the fire gear and stuff. They are always looking for grants. So, for example, there was a $57,000 item approved for fiscal '25 that has now come off the books because they were able to get a grant. So even though the borrow authorization happened, we won't need to borrow. So the town is always searching for other ways.
It's a great challenge. One of the things that is on the capital plan is you may have heard, is the beach house at Sandy Pond, the bathhouse. There's an example of an asset that went in 1946. It's the same one since in my opinion, something should have been done a long time ago, but no, good point. And I think we should, Mr. Chair, when we start in the fall, the capital again, is maybe, come back to FinCom and at least show, what the departments are submitting initially. That doesn't mean they're gonna get everything that's gonna be happening. We can take a look at that, and maybe Barbara can apply some of what we talked about in those real examples. And that process usually starts, the capital requests are usually due from departments in November, and the capital planning committee starts to meet usually the beginning of December through December and January.
This is, I mean, Jen and Eric and Robert, and this is really good ideas. And one other thing that occurred to me on the same vein was last year in the capital plan, we had various departments needed trucks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Dan, and they went back and said, oh, well, I've got a truck here that somebody else can use. Did we follow through on that, or?
Yes.
No, we started a discussion on that.
There was some consolidation, and that's a good example.
So what I'm just thinking is for their suggestions is, maybe I'll just throw out if we could get a list of, here's things that, if it's, here are things to be, department heads, here are things to be looking at, as you look your budget are we really at the end of the life, useful life? What can we do to extend it? And again, I think the suggestions that Eric and Jen made, and just maybe have that communicated to the. Good stuff. I finally found my notes here. One of the things we wanted to talk about, and Robert is, just like we had a presentation on the debt service today, was the Community Preservation Act, and how that works. Do you think we could get a presentation on that for our group for our August 21st meeting, Robert?
I do think so. I'll reach out to Janet Provadakis, who's the chair, and is very knowledgeable. And when you guys had last met to talk about topics, I'd sort of put that bug in her ear. So I think that would be a good one for your August 21st.
So again, same sort of thing.
Yep.
Here's the basics of it.
I'll reach out to her tomorrow and then connect with you, but I think that would be a good one.
Okay, does that sound good to the group?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Joint effort here with the interesting.
You wrote the list, I just had to remember there was a list.
Yes.
So, okay, all right, so that'll be your, and then I am gonna, again, we can double check on this, is that come September, I think we can start getting back into the first and third weeks of the month and just start having meetings. We're gonna have those penciled in, and obviously as we get into October, we'll definitely be the first and third of the month, but let's shoot for September to get back onto that schedule. Okay, any other notes on the next meeting or anything else? Okay, do we have any public input?
Just Carly and Max.
Yeah.
Fine, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 We are adjourned as of 7:04.